How is everybody doing out there? It is myself, Jeff Black, the mighty Brandon DeCruz on the other side. We are Chasing Clarity Health and Fitness Podcast, and today, ladies and gentlemen, is episode 84, the Body Recomp Blueprint Part 2, Training and Lifestyle Optimization for Recomping. Real quick, we are having an event. Well, by that, myself and Jason Theobald Scoob are doing an event where we ask some of our friends like Brandon and Lauren Conlin and Justin Mahaley and others. You'll see this ticket, Cameron Cheek, a few others are going to be on it, to come to Nashville, Tennessee on February 9th and 10th. It is a Friday and a Saturday. The tickets will be $100. All the money raised is going to go to charity. The goal is to get 100 people. We'd like to be able to present $10,000 to Vanderbilt Children's Hospital here in Nashville, Tennessee. They actually do a lot of research with my bone disease. They're like the second leading one behind Montreal, Quebec. So it'll be cool to be able to raise money and gift it to them because I know the great work they do with the kids with the OI around here in the Middle Tennessee area and actually all around, man. A lot of people actually travel here to see Dr. Marvis, who's Keegan's very lucky I have his doctorate, but the website and all that will go up. You're looking at the second week of December, but this event is confirmed. If you all need to book your travel and your hotel, go ahead and do it. You guys are fine. We are putting the event on, so don't worry. It just takes a moment for us to get all this stuff together because there's literally Brandon, like 14 people speaking. Like I'm not speaking. I gave my spot up to someone else.
Yeah. Do you want to go through the? Do you want to go through the full list of?
Do you have the full list right there? I don't have.
I can pull it up for you.
All
yeah.
Right,
so this charity seminar event is going to feature. Obviously, Jeff will be hosting this. We'll have Jason Theobald, who will be a presenter. I will be presenting on maximizing nutrition for muscle gain. So that'll be a whole, essentially like a lean gains blueprint. We will have Jason Robertson, which is a Robo. One of your good friends, Lauren Conlin. We're going to have Lacey Dunn, John Gorman. We're going to have Ben. Can you pronounce his last name for me? I'm not.
Benazita.
Exactly. All right. So perfect. We're going to have Skip Hill. So the old school OG of online
Skip
coaching.
Won't be able to make it. We have Taylor Day Haas coming in replace of him.
All right. So we have Taylor Day Haas, and then we have
monster
Justin Mahaley as well. And I'm pretty certain that I didn't miss anyone off that ticket.
No, I don't think so at all. I'm trying to think anyone else has. So it's going to be a hell of an event. You're going to hear a lot of great topics, a lot of dynamic topics. I think this is going to be the most dynamic one that Jason and I put on. Our reason for doing this is really simple. We just want to help the other coaches out there. And then number two, kind of kick it with everybody. It's been a while since we've seen people. And Jason and I have gotten kind of used to seeing everybody every year. So we'd like to bring everybody up to Nashville. Everybody knows that Iron House is a good time. We'll make sure that we all go out Saturday night and see some of Nashville. Albeit, though, I won't take Brandon to where we took him last time.
Oh, Lord.
We'll find someone else.
Let's definitely avoid the last.
We'll find
the way
somewhere.
I spent my 30th birthday.
We will find somewhere else to go. But ladies and gentlemen, look for it. Brandon and I will be sharing it. We'll be tagging it. It's for a great event. And then, Brandon, you're actually going to be staying with me. You actually get the spare room, buddy.
Perfect, man. I'm looking forward to it as always. Yeah, I'm always like that roommate for you when I come down there, which I truly appreciate.
But Keegan was like talking to me about it. He's like, can't wait till he sees what I eat.
And I'm excited because he was dialed in. He was dialed in. Even, I mean, the first time that he was really into bodybuilding that I went was 2022. So it was June 2022. I went for one of my birthday weekends, and he was already, making his cream of rice, getting his protein powder out. But I'm really excited to see like the transformation, especially because when you're younger, this is like the most exciting time within your training career. So obviously he's making gains at a rapid rate, but he's also like fully entrenched into this. He's like super energetic, and I think that's a really good thing. It's actually, I will say as a comment, I really love the fact that I have a very wide group of clientele that I work with. And Jeff, I'm sure you can, relate to the same type of feeling because I have, young individuals that are right out of college, they're 21, 22. They're either, they want to get into competing or they're someone that was a college athlete and they want to channel their competitive endeavors or their competitive drive into something else that's going to help them. They might be working on Wall Street, but they want to have something else that they can chase. So they're more so hobby builders than bodybuilders. But then I also have, individuals in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s. My oldest client right now is 71 years old that I work with. However, the average age demographic that I work with is about 35 to 45 on average. However, I do have some, just studs of individuals that not only young, but also, people that, for instance, I just peaked a client of mine. So shout out to Angie. We just did a fat loss phase and we decided, she is a gym owner herself. She's a fitness professional, but she's never done a competition. She's never done a photo shoot, none of that. So I actually just peaked her this morning for a photo shoot. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the pictures. I just had, one of my clients, they both, what's interesting is Angie turns 49 this month. Grant turns 49 the end of September, I believe, and he got ready for an anniversary and birthday celebration that they went from Canada to Hawaii. So I have a bunch of individuals that are like, they're getting their best physiques to date, whether they're, in their 20s or they're in their late 40s. I have people in their 50s that they're morphing and stuff, and it's so cool to see like different chapters and stages of life, because you have those like young and eager individuals that are 21, 22, or they're early to mid 20s, but then you have other individuals that have put so much work, effort, and attention into building a business, building a family, really providing security for their family structure, buying a house and really securing themselves financially, fiscally, all these type of things. And now it's almost like, it's not like they're laying back off the business, but the business is essentially running itself. So now they can take a little bit more time to devote to themselves. The kids are getting out of the house. For instance, Angie has 2 kids that are already in high school. So she's in a period in her life where it's, she's still running ragged with her kids, but at the same time, it's not like, they're toddlers where, it's really difficult to be able to really prioritize sleep, nutrition, training, really allocating enough time in your day to devote to those things to really maximize your physique. So it's really cool to work with people of all different backgrounds, different goals, and different experiences, you know what I mean? And it's cool to see different people thriving in different conditions and making it happen by, providing a better structure for them, helping them with better habit formation and behavior modification, really integrating that into their daily lifestyle. And one thing I really love about working with not only other, productive and successful business, professionals, whether it be entrepreneurs or people that are just executives at high level companies, is that, or family, people that are the head of their families, it's that they have such an appreciation for what they're able to do, but they also have this mindset where they're so used to getting things done that not only have they kind of slacked off their fitness, but now when they integrate these new habits and behaviors, it's not only for them, but it's also rubbing off their family. So I've had, many of wives and husbands, spouses reach out to me like, listen, I'm really appreciative for the work you've done with either my wife or my husband, because it's rubbed off on my eating habits, our children's eating habits. Like it's this downstream domino effect, which is a beautiful thing about fitness, nutrition, training, and just really trying to develop yourself in multiple aspects and facets of your life.
Dude, I love it. So, ladies and gentlemen, look forward to seeing you all February 9th and 10th, 2024. Dude, it's wild to think that Thanksgiving.
I know.
Sweet.
Crazy.
Episode 84. So like we said, so today we're going to talk about the Body Recomp Blueprint Part 2, obvious follow-up to the last one. If you would like to know what this is about, you should probably listen to episode 83. In fact, while you're at it, maybe episode 1 through 83 might be helpful. And then just leave us a 5-star rating because Brandon works his ass off. But we're going to get into training and lifestyle optimization for recomping. So as always, let's get into the intro of today's topic B.
All right, my man. So on last week's episode, as you hit on, we covered the nutritional principles that we need to dial in order to attain the goal of building muscle and losing fat at the same time, aka the process of body recomposition. And we covered multiple topics. So we covered things including what states of energy balance allow us to achieve muscle growth and fat loss simultaneously. We covered the size of the deficit we can use and still gain muscle. And we went over some of the data, the research, and then our own, anecdata. So our anecdotal experience working with hundreds of clients in the trenches and helping them to achieve this goal. We went over specifically the protein intake that helps to elicit body recomposition, because from a macronutrient perspective, protein is going to be the biggest lever that we can pull to really increase the accrual of lean body mass, while also helping with fat loss because it's a thermogenic nutrient in and of itself. And we also covered how nutrient timing can help us achieve better body composition. So on today's podcast episode, we're going to cover part 2 of our body recomp blueprint, because you guys all know I love my series. I like building out, starting with a foundation, really working on it. So 2 episodes ago, which would have been episode 82, we went over well-trained individuals recomp. Then we went over last week with the Body Recomp Blueprint 1, and now part 2, and we're going to cover how training and different lifestyle factors impact our ability to achieve body recomposition, as nutrition is only half of the equation, but our training and our lifestyle setup is the other half, and it needs to be considered, and it needs to, many of you, and many of clients that I work with, these are areas that need to be improved upon and dialed in to put us in the best position to be able to achieve a degree of body recomposition. So that's what we are going to cover on today's podcast.
All right, man. Well, let's get into it. So what is the big thing? Like, I guess, like, as in regards to training for recomp, what does that look like? What does that really encompass? Because when you're training, you can think a lot of different things, right?
No, absolutely. So when it comes to the process of body recomposition and really trying to attain this goal, we have two goals we're trying to achieve at the same time, which is the growth and or maintenance of metabolically active muscle tissue, while we're also trying to simultaneously lose body fat so that we can achieve a leaner and more muscular physique. And as we discussed in the last two episodes of the show, your diet and calorie intake are going to be the main determinants of whether you lose fat or not, as losing body fat requires being in a calorie or an energy deficit. And this is where the processes of fat loss and muscle growth differ, as fat loss is an energy dependent process, whereas muscle growth is both a training stimulus and muscle protein signaling dependent process. And this means that we can gain muscle as long as we have a robust and progressive training stimulus and sufficient protein intake to maximize the MPS response, which is needed for the process of building new muscle. So you can build muscle while without essentially being in a surplus and in an excess of calories, as your body can either use exogenous energy through the food that we eat, or it can utilize endogenous energy, which is our stored energy via body fat or even glycogen. Stored glycogen is another source of energy, and it can utilize these different stored macronutrients and stored fuel sources to build muscle, which is why training is so important to the muscle growth component of body recomposition. So when it comes to training for body recomposition, the best approach to take is to follow a periodized and progressive resistance training program that focuses on eliciting hypertrophy, aka growing muscle. So we're not talking CrossFit training, we're not talking circuit training, we're not doing Zumba, things like that. We need to focus really fundamentally on hypertrophy training, which is muscle growth training or bodybuilding training, exactly. So now here's the thing: the exact training split, the training frequency, the weekly volume, the load and rep ranges that I'm going to have each of my clients use and follow during a recomp phase is going to differ between individuals. And we had just covered this on a recent episode. We did so both with Dr. Scott Stevenson as well as the episode that followed that, where we spoke about the individual differences, which is also referred to by the term response heterogeneity, of how different individuals respond to different programming variables, which is why I can't give you guys like this one recipe for body recomp, but I can go over some of the more fundamental principles as well as some broad-based recommendations and suggestions that I would give anyone out there that has the goal of attaining a body recomposition. So first and foremost, hypertrophy training is meant to be challenging and to feel difficult, as we need to provide our bodies with a progressive training stimulus, which causes our muscles to adapt and grow. So you're not going to be able to just go in there and just go through the motions and actually build muscle in a deficit. It needs to be progressive training that challenges your body. You need to be pushing yourself. And one of the number one training related reasons why many don't attain body recomposition, and this could also go back to why people think it may not be possible because they're not seeing it in their own lives. And this is really because a lot of people, they don't train with a sufficient enough intensity, and they aren't putting in enough effort in the gym to transform their physiques. And if you take a look around any gym that you go to, especially a commercial gym, so we're talking your LA Fitnesses, your Planet Fitnesses, things of that sort, you're going to see a lot of people who are just in there just to check the, off the box. Essentially, they want to just say, "Hey, I work out." So they check off the box of hitting a workout. But most trainees do not push themselves hard in the gym. They're not out of breath. They're not sweating. They're not really exerting themselves. Their facial expressions stay the exact same from rep 1 to rep 10 of a 10 rep set. It's like they're just going through the motions essentially. And so it goes without saying that all of your sets for an exercise shouldn't look like warm-ups, where the rep speed is the exact same and there's no slowing of your rep speed and movement velocity. And now when it comes to specifically to relative intensity and the proximity to failure that we should train at to grow muscle, research done within the last few years has teased out that we don't need to train to failure each and every single set of every single session to gain muscle, but we do need to be relatively close to failure to ensure our training is challenging enough to cause an adaptation. And that specific adaptation that we're looking for is muscle growth. So generally what we want to do is we want to train within 0 to 3 reps in reserve, aka reps to failure, on most of the sets that we do. But it's important to note that training at 3 reps in reserve is still very challenging, despite the fact that it doesn't induce as much fatigue as an all-out set of training to failure does. And keep in mind that if say like you have a 10 rep max on an incline dumbbell press and you do 110 pound dumbbells each side for 10 reps, that even if you're training at 3 reps in reserve, say on your first week of a mesocycle, you're training at 3 reps in reserve, that's still hitting, lifting those suckers, and they're heavy to begin with, for 7 reps, which is a challenging set in and of itself. So there is never a week besides, say, a deload week, or if you're on vacation and you're doing like an active recovery week, there should never be a week within your programming that feels extremely easy. Like you could do that workout, you could do the entire workout and then do the exact same workout and have the same performance right after. You could do 2 sessions all in one because you didn't push yourself enough. And that's what a lot of people do. They barely, do anything essentially. They barely break a sweat. And so they go in there and they feel like fresh as a daisy. And it's not that you need to feel excessively fatigued and broken down and super sore after training, but you need to have pushed yourself into a capacity where your body's going to elicit a change, which that change would be an increase in muscular strength, muscular endurance, as well as in muscle size. And another component of training, which I find many tend to overlook, is their technique and execution. But in order to maximize muscle growth, you want to aim to standardize your technique and your rep execution. So every rep should look similar to one another in terms of the technique you use and the depth you achieve. So the range of motion that you're utilizing. It shouldn't be like you're doing full range of motion reps, the first 5 reps, and then you're doing half range of motion reps, the last 5 reps of a 10 rep set. And so what we want to do is we want to get a proficient technique down and then use the same exercise setup and technique on a weekly basis to ensure that the rep and load progressions that you see are an actual indication of progression, you're not just seeing an increase, whether that be in load or reps, per set, just from cheating or shortening the range of motion or using excessive momentum or body language to just eke out another rep or increase the loads that you're using. And the only thing that should be drastically changing across a set is the actual speed of your repetitions. As the more fatigue we accumulate, the harder it is to maintain the same rep speed. And this applies to both high load, low rep training and low load, high rep training. So this is a sign that you're getting close to failure. And one of those, I often speak about this with clients. Like they'll ask me, how do I know that I'm getting close to failure? How do I know I'm 2 repetitions in reserve or 3 repetitions in reserve? And one of the ways to notice that is that you'll see that your movement velocity slows, as when the speed of our rep slows down, it's an indication that we're getting close to failure and starting to get full motor unit recruitment, which essentially we're putting all that mechanical tension on all our muscle fibers. Another extremely important component of training during a recomp phase, which we need to focus on, is the principle of progressive overload. And progressive overload refers to a gradual increase in the training stress that we put upon our bodies, which causes our muscles to adapt in response and grow as a result of that training. And there are many ways to progress the stimulus of our training. So we can do these by multiple mechanisms. So we can do it by increasing reps per set with a particular load. So you can take the same load that you're utilizing on week 1 and simply increase the amount of reps that you do from week 1 to week 2 to week 3 to week 4, or even just across, multiple mesocycles. You can increase the load that you're using within a target rep range. So if you're utilizing a 100-pound dumbbell for sets of 8, you could essentially, and you're doing it for sets of 8, but by the end of that mesocycle, you're up to sets of 10, and that's the end of your rep range. Then you can go up to, 105 dumbbells, 105-pound dumbbells, and go back to the end of the rep range, meaning 8 reps per set, and continue that progression going forward. And then also another way, which is one of the ways that I utilize with many of my programs, is increasing relative effort across a mesocycle by decreasing your proximity to failure, which could look like going from 3 to 2 to 1 to 0 reps in reserve across the course of a training cycle. Now, when it comes to increasing training performance during a recomp phase, we want to aim to get stronger, especially on isolation movements, which aren't as impacted by losing fat and losing weight. And this is because it's difficult to maintain all of our strength on multi-joint compound movements like, a barbell bench press, a back squat, an overhead press, and a deadlift. And this is because as you lose fat, it changes your leverages. So for instance, if you lose a lot of fat, your range of motion on a bench press is going to increase because now you're a smaller person. So the fact that you've lost fat on both your chest and your back will make it so hitting your chest, if you're trying to do a full range of motion bench, now you're going to have to increase your range of motion and make the movement more challenging, which is why many report that they're losing strength on certain movements. And this is where looking at progression on machine-based movements, cable-based movements, and isolation lifts tell a better story about your progression, as they aren't as impacted by changes in your leverages and your body size. So you want to aim to to maintain strength. But if you do see that it's dropping on compound movements, realize that this is totally normal. If you're getting stronger on exercises that you've been performing for a long period of time, that progress is most likely due to gains in muscle size, not neuromuscular adaptations. Because once you've been doing a movement pattern for a continued period of time, you're most likely not becoming, significantly more skilled or efficient at that movement pattern. So the gains in either reps or strength is a better indication that you're actually gaining muscle. So you're gaining contractile tissue, which can now exert more force because essentially a larger muscle, a bigger muscle is a stronger muscle.
I really liked how you talked about the rep and reserves, because I think that's a hard one for people to comprehend. And I usually find, like, when I get really beginner people to the gym, like brand spanking new, I always try to find something where it gets hard for them around 15 to 20 reps so they can start understanding, because many of them will be like, oh, that's a heavy 6. But then, like, you'd be like, all right, give them a little bit lighter. Like, it can only be like 5 pounds. And then suddenly they're like banging out 20, 25. So I really liked how you brought all that stuff up, man. That was really cool. So the importance of tracking and your training and logging your lifts. Now, I'm going to admit, I didn't really do this well in my career, but I've always been more of a volume junkie. And whenever I did follow the dog crap stuff, I found the log to be really enjoyable. But I feel like in what we're trying to do with Recomp, you really can't achieve this without really logging your training and your lifts because of a lot of factors involved. So let's go ahead and hit them with that one, man.
Yeah, so I'll be honest with you. There are so many people who make the mistake of not tracking their training and logging their lifts, especially during a body recomposition phase. But just like if we can extrapolate it to other areas that help us dial in our body composition improvement, if we look at like tracking your nutrition, this helps you become more aware of your habits and behaviors around what you're eating in your diet, your dietary habits. And if you're checking off the nutritional boxes needed to get to your goal, tracking your training can provide many of those same benefits. So it's advantageous to track multiple areas of our programming. So not just our nutrition programming, but also our training program. And the issue is, if you don't track or measure your training, how can you ensure you're improving upon your performance over time if you're unsure of what you did the week prior? So, for instance, I'll give an example. Say that you're doing 15 total sets per session, 5 days per week. And so every session you go in, you have 15 sets to work through on multiple body parts, or essentially that's a total volume per session, but you're saying doing 5 sets for 3 body parts every time you go into the gym. Do you really expect to remember every single weight you lifted and the amount of reps you lifted it for the next week when you go back and hit the exact same workout? I think not. And the same thing could be said about dietary recall, which is why I often suggest that clients track throughout the course of the day or pre-track the night before, so that they don't have to worry about lapses in terms of memory or forgetting to add something in, or they ate this or that. It's like, listen, just track as you go along throughout the day, because that's going to allow it to be more accurate, but also it's going to allow for it to be more time efficient because you're doing 30 seconds of tracking every meal 4 times per day, instead of sitting down for 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the day and having to spend more time and mental masturbation, essentially trying to remember what you did previously. And so I often look around the gym when I'm training and realize that next to no one is logging and tracking their lifts. And that's something I'm specifically seeing in the gym I go to now, which is a commercial gym. Whereas I used to, for many years, I went to a bodybuilding gym and everyone either had, a written logbook. So that could be like a journal or a notepad, or they had like a log that they were using in their phone. And by simply tracking what you're doing, it'll give you a target to aim at each and every week and a better reference point to work towards making progress. And if your goal is to just go into the gym to break a sweat, it's one thing. But if your goal is to build muscle and lose body fat and actually make progress, you need to know what you've done previously so that you can push yourself to beat it. And what I always have found interesting is when it comes to other activities such as cardio, many will look at how long they ran for or the distance they covered, but few do the same for their hypertrophy sessions, which is something I think many could improve upon and benefit from doing so. So there are a ton of benefits of logging our training, as it helps us to keep our workouts consistent and organized. It allows us to track our progressions across a mesocycle, as well as from mesocycle to mesocycle, which is really important for your intermediate and advanced trainees who aren't going to be able to make progress from week to week, but really it's going to be from one mesocycle to the next mesocycle. We're going to be able to compare and contrast, hey, what did you do week 2 of mesocycle 1 compared to week 2 of mesocycle 2? And it also, logging also provides us a target for us to reach and try to shoot for. Because if we did a particular exercise for 3 sets of 8 with 1 rep in reserve, having this logged down allows us to know that we should be pushing to get 9 reps this week, based on the fact that last week we had 1 rep in the tank and we were doing 8 reps per set. And unlike with nutrition, tracking, which generally is best done through an app, you can actually track very simply. And this is something I often suggest to my clients. Like, you can literally just track by simply creating a note in your phone where each week you log what your workout looks like in terms of the exercises you're doing, the set and rep targets that you have per exercise, the load and reps you achieved each set. And then each week you can go back to the previous week's log and simply add that next workout to it. And so essentially how I do it in like a notes form is I just have, say, push session 1, week 1. And then when I come to, so that could be Monday, that is Monday for me, of, this week. Next week, I would just look up push session 1, and I would go back and I would look at each exercise and I would just add another week to it. So it'll say week 1, I'm doing 3 sets of 8, and what did I use for that weight? And then the next week I'm looking and I'm putting, all right, week 2, my rep range target is 3 sets of 8 to 10 reps. I'm trying to get 3 sets of 9, just so I could push myself for progression. So overall, when it comes to training for recomp, we need to focus on going to the gym with a plan, essentially a plan of action and with intention. We need to be tracking variables like the loads and reps to ensure you're progressing over time, as progressing the stimulus of your training and providing a consistent overload is necessary to build tissue, especially when you're in a deficit. And you need to set a plan and go in with a progressive mindset where you track what you do in the first session and then you aim to beat that performance in terms of either load or reps per set the next time you hit that session again, just so you have some type of mark. And a lot of times, you're not, just like with darts, if you didn't have a bullseye out in front of you, you most likely would hit it. So it's not that you have to, perfectly nail that bullseye, or it's bullseye or bust, but essentially we want to have a target to aim at and goals to really work towards, so that we know that we're essentially checking off the boxes that are needed and are necessitated to reach our goal.
All right. Now, with that being said, what are some important lifestyle factors for body recomposition that people should really take into account and consider? And how would you rank them? Are you going to list them according like how you rank them, or what do you kind of think? You just spit them out and say these are more important than the other, or are they all equally as important?
I'll be honest with you, my man. It's often difficult to give a hierarchy. Like, say, this is the number 1, this is the number 2, but I can give you based off of what my experience with clients are, and then also what some of the data will show. And I would say for a lifestyle factor, the number 1 factor would be sleep and body recomposition, and the impacts that sleep has on body recomposition. So we can get into that one first, and then we can also go into stress, because these are going to be the 2 main lifestyle factors and domains that are either going to hinder someone's ability to recomp, or if you're able to dial these in and improve upon where they are now. So for instance, if you're able to improve upon your sleep quality now, going into a recomp phase as compared to in previous phases, it'll enable you to have a higher likelihood of recomping. And the same thing can be said about stress management. So if we're able to dial these 2 in, it'll essentially increase the likelihood of you being able to be able to accomplish recomposition if you're an advanced trainee, or if you are someone that's beginner or intermediate and you already have a high disposition or a high likelihood of accomplishing body recomposition, it'll enable you to essentially achieve a higher degree. So a better body recomposition, essentially.
Okay, so then now factor 1, we have sleep and body recomp, and then we have factor 2, stress and body recomp. So let's get into those like together, because that way I don't want to disturb your train of thought. And if I have anything, I'll chime it in.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, it's hard to give a hierarchy, but just based on my experience, and then also we have so much more data on sleep and its effect on your body composition, as well as the ability to lose fat and gain muscle, that I would say that that is going to be one of the top priorities. And it's also something that I see that many people struggle with. And so the first lifestyle factor that we're going to cover is sleep, and how it can impact our ability to recomp. And this really comes down to our sleep quantity and our sleep quality. And sleep is one of the most important things that plays an essential role in our health and fitness, yet it's often one of the most overlooked component of one's day and one's overall lifestyle. And I always find it funny when I hear hard-charging individuals, these type A personalities, or very successful entrepreneurs on social media claiming that sleep is for the weak. But when in reality, if you actually look into the data, a lack of sleep is one of the main factors that can actually make us weak, or actually make us respond less favorably to resistance and strength training. And sleep impacts and influences so many aspects of our health and fitness, including our body composition outcomes, our muscle growth and fat loss outcomes, our level of insulin sensitivity, and our ability to partition nutrients properly, and really our overall nutrient partitioning abilities. It impacts our hormone health and our hormone balance, impacts our appetite and our hunger management, our training performance, as well as our recovery from that training. It impacts our stress management skills, our brain health and our cognitive function, and then our overall quality of life. And when it specifically comes to sleep and body composition outcomes, research finds that insufficient sleep leads to more lean mass loss and less fat mass loss when we're in a calorie deficit. So, for example, a 2010 study looked at how different lengths of sleep impact the results individuals get from the exact same calorie deficit. And in this specific study, what they did was a crossover trial where they had participants go through two conditions, which both lasted 2 weeks in length. And in one condition, they got sufficient sleep, which was up to 8.5 hours per night. So it was like an optimal sleep length. And then in the other condition, this was the insufficient sleep group. And essentially, they got 5.5 hours of sleep per night. And in both sleep conditions, they were in the exact same calorie deficit. So nutrition was clamped, meaning it was the same in both 2 week conditions for each individual. Now, what they found was that in both conditions, each group lost the same amount of weight due to having the exact same calorie deficit. So obviously, sleep is not going to negate energy balance or the law of thermodynamics. However, the proportion of that weight loss was completely different in both conditions. So both groups lost 3 kilograms over the course of the study, but the sleep restricted group only lost 0.6 kilograms from fat mass and lost 2.4 kilograms from fat-free mass. So essentially, when we look at that from a proportional, percentage perspective, when they didn't get sufficient sleep, so they were in the sleep restricted group, they got 5.5 hours per night, they only lost 20% of the weight from fat mass, whereas 80% of all the weight that they lost came from muscle tissue. And then in a 2018 study, participants were put onto an 8-week hypocaloric diet. And in both groups, their calorie deficit was matched. However, in one group, they slept 1 hour less per night during the week and then made up for some of the sleep loss that they had sustained during the week on the weekends. And essentially what they did was they tried to equal it out a little bit, where they slept an extra 1 hour or more during the weekend, whereas the other group got a consistent full night of sleep 7 nights per week. And both groups lost the same amount of weight as they were both in the same degree of a deficit, but the quality of weight that they lost were drastically different. So the sleep restriction group who essentially slept 1 hour less per week during the week, and really when we look at it in totality, they actually only slept about 3 hours less per week in total than the other group that had sufficient sleep because they made up for some of it on the weekend. So think about it like this. During the week, they got 5 hours less sleep, but they made up for it by sleeping over an hour more on the weekends. And so that group lost 84% of the weight that they lost from lean mass, so from muscle tissue, with only 16% coming from the loss in fat mass. Whereas the group that had a full night's sleep 7 nights per week only lost 17% of their weight from lean mass, with 83% of it coming from fat mass. And they also found that the only group the group that got less sleep was the only one that saw a reduction in leptin levels. So they were more likely to experience lower levels of satiety and higher levels of hunger due to this loss in sleep. So despite losing the same amount of weight, the actual body composition change between the two groups were completely different. And research also finds that actually, if we look at the opposite, so we're speaking about insufficient sleep now and how it can limit your fat loss as well as your ability to accrue muscle tissue or to essentially maintain muscle tissue. But if we look at research on the other end of the spectrum and we look at how improving our sleep can impact our body composition results, we have other research that finds the exact opposite. So essentially, a 2020 study, what they did was they put participants into a 10-week resistance training study, but split them into two groups. And they were following the exact same training program, but in one group, they received a sleep education program to improve their sleep throughout the study, whereas the other group received no advice or counseling on sleep. And they weren't even told, hey, listen, improve your sleep. Essentially, it was like kind of like out of sight, out of mind. And essentially, like if someone goes from not working with a coach and they're not aware of the impacts that sleep has to going to working with a coach that educates them on it, it's almost the difference between these two groups. And say that two individuals, one that's without a coach and is unaware of the impact that sleep has, and they're kind of just going through their daily life, they decide to go into a body recomposition phase. And then we have another individual that gets help from a coach and is influenced and is educated and empowered with information about sleep quality. It's like comparing and contrasting the journey of these two individuals. And what they found was although both groups increased their lean body mass as a result of the training, the sleep intervention group had a larger increase in lean mass and lost significantly more fat mass than the group not receiving the sleep education. So they finished the study with a significantly larger reduction in body fat. So they ended up recomping. So this is where focusing on our sleep can help to improve the results we get from our nutrition, our training programs. So if anyone out there is struggling with improving their sleep quality and quantity, not only I don't want you to only take on this information, but I also encourage you to go back to episode 63, which is entitled Optimizing Your Sleep Routine, Nutrition, Lifestyle, and Supplement Interventions for Getting the Perfect Night of Sleep. Because within that podcast, we have recovered a ton of interventions to get better sleep and to help you better your body composition results. And this is going to specifically not only tie into, we talked about fat loss, muscle growth, but also considering the fact that body recomposition is doing both at the same time, this is going to enable you to be able to more effectively achieve that goal of body recomposition. Now, the next lifestyle factor that can impact body recomposition results is our stress levels. And I always say that we cannot separate our psychology from our physiology, as there's this bidirectional relationship between the two, meaning that our psychology impacts our physiology and our physiology impacts our psychology. And a great example of that is how mental stress impacts our physical training and our response to resistance training. So we have research that finds that psychological stress can negatively impact both physiological recovery, so your physical recovery, and strength outcomes from resistance training, which can then have downstream effects on our ability to grow muscle and also maintain muscle, especially when we're in a deficit. So a 2008 study looked at students with high and low academic stress to see the impact that these differing levels of stress had on their training outcomes. And in this study, they took males and females and had them take tests to assess their life event stress, so the amount of stressful events that they had encountered in their life, as well as their perceived stress levels. So they wanted to see objectively how stressed were these individuals, and then subjectively, how stressed did these individuals feel? And then what they did was they divided them up into a low stress and a high stress group. They then had them go through a 12-week resistance training program where each group followed the exact same training program, the exact same progressions. And what they did was they tested both their strength at both the start and the end of the study period. So at week 1 and then at the end of week 12. And they found that there were significant differences in strength gains between the low stress group and the high stress group. So the high stress group gained less strength on both the bench and the squat, and also gained less muscle in the arms and the lower body than the low stress group, which gained more strength and muscle mass, which shows that high levels of stress can impair both the strength and muscular adaptations that we make from the exact same resistance training program. And then we also have other research that looks at the exact downstream effect that stress can have on our ability to recover from training, because we know that high levels of stress can drastically impact our recovery capacity. So in one study, they took participants and had them complete a perceived stress scale based on their perceived levels of stress, meaning this isn't like how many stressful events that this person had. It was, what do you perceive your stress levels to be? Are you a stress cadet? Are you someone that constantly feels like you're tired but wired, like things like that? And it's really, we have to realize that it's not only the amount of stressful events that we encounter, but also how do we perceive those? Do we handle those well? Do we have stress mitigation techniques? Do we have stress management skills? Or are we someone that gets overwhelmed by the stressors in our life? Because we have to realize that our backgrounds, our history, and our skills, as well as our coping strategies and abilities, differ between individuals. So what's stressful to one person, so for instance, what might be stressful to Jeff may not be stressful to me, and vice versa. So this also plays a massive component, because if you are someone that even the little things in life, they really stress you, and you ruminate on them, and you really let them take control of your day, and instead of focusing on the aspects in life that you can control, you focus on those that are outside of your control, and you allow those to really eat away at you, this can increase your subjective levels of stress. And so within this study, what they did was they had them, they tested them, and they looked at their perceived levels of stress. So these are their subjective ratings of stress levels. And then they separated them into a low perceived stress group and a high perceived stress group. And then what they had them do was come back a few days later and had them undergo a challenging resistance training workout. And so what they did after that training parameter, or the training program, was they tested their markers of performance, like maximal force production, and then also recovery markers like their soreness, their fatigue levels, their energy levels, every 24 hours for the next 4 days after the training session. And the individuals that reported having higher perceived stress took longer to recover their maximal force outcome. And on average, it took these high stress individuals double the amount of time it took to recover than those with the low stress score. So just your perception of stress, just thinking you have a lot of life stress and feeling like it's bogging you down, took these individuals from a 48-hour recovery capacity. So within 2 days they were recovered, they were able to have productive training on those same body parts again. It took the individuals that had high perceived stress, it took them 4 days to recover, so double the recovery time. And it also took those with higher life event stress a longer amount of time to dissipate fatigue and soreness and regain their baseline energy levels after the training session than it did for those that had a lower perceived level of stress. And now keep in mind, this is your perception of stress. So this could be that these individuals have the exact same stress in reality. They are facing the exact same stressors, the same components, and obviously everyone's background is different, the situations that they find. But really, when we look at it from an objective perspective, they could have the same amount of life stresses occurring at this time. However, those that had better better stress tolerance or better coping mechanisms and strategies, they reported having lower stress scores. They had much less of an impact on the recovery from training. And so we really have to consider the fact that stress can have a massive impact not only on our performance and also the gains that we make, but also our recovery from training, which can impact our body composition progress, both in terms of losing body fat and gaining or maintaining muscle. And this is why it's so important to be aware of our stress levels, especially during a diet, and try to manage them to the best of our abilities.
So then what are some mindset shifts that one can do for Recomp? Are there any good reads that you have? Any little rituals or anything you'd like to pass on to people?
Yeah, so really when it comes down to it, I think we have to speak on some of the self-limiting beliefs that a lot of people have around the topic of body recomposition. And this is something that we teased out and we went into depth on in the first episode. That would be episode 82 of the podcast, where we initially covered the myths and misconceptions about body recomposition. But I think that one of the biggest limiting factors as to why I see people not getting the results that they want in terms of being able to gain muscle and lose fat is because of their mindset and the fact that they believe it's impossible before they even try. So a lot of people have this self-limiting belief within their abilities and their capabilities, which often stop them from even trying. And that's a huge thing. And this is extremely applicable when it comes to a goal like body recomposition, because body recomposition is challenging. Yes, it's possible, but it's extremely challenging. And so, it really comes down to the fact that this requires a lot of physical effort, but also a lot of mental fortitude. And most people are under the impression that body recomposition is something that rarely happens, except for certain categories of people. So they think it only happens in beginners, and it only happens in obese individuals. And this is something I honestly disagree with, as I've had everyone, I've had so many clients that are coming from different backgrounds, whether it be, intermediate lifestyle clients to intermediate and advanced trainees who have been able to recomp, but it takes both physical changes to their lifestyle, it takes mental shifts and things of that sort. And this is possible for many of them because they aren't dialing in the variables within their programming as much as they could be. And so they realize that there are some gaps in the system, there are some holes in their game, which we're then able to improve upon. And thus, they're able to improve their physique as a result. And so this is where, as a coach, I'll look into different areas of my clients, especially new clients, areas within their nutrition, their training, and their lifestyle. And I look for areas that they either have bottlenecks in, they have issues, they have challenges in, they're being held back by, or areas that they're under executing in. And then as a result of that, I try to modify these areas to improve and optimize their results. And it's important to remember that we can always improve different areas of our programming, our lifestyle, and our mindset to advance our results. And another mindset shift that many need to make during a recomp phase is how they approach their training during a deficit, because many automatically assume that when they're losing fat, they should be getting weaker and they should be feeling exhausted. They shouldn't be able to push themselves or handle as much volume in the gym, so they stop pushing themselves. However, you need to train like you're trying to maximize muscle tissue accrual, even if you're in a deficit. And these little details can make all the difference as they add up over time and over the course of consecutive mesocycles and blocks of training. So if you're someone who has the goal of recomping, you need to maintain a mindset of progression and push yourself to the max instead of just thinking, first of all, it is impossible, or just allowing a lack of belief to limit your progress and to limit your ability to push yourself. And that's probably the biggest mindset shift that people have to make. Yes, I am capable of doing this first and foremost, but also I'm going to need to push myself. I need to get outside of my comfort zone. I need to show up even when I don't feel like it. Like, there are so many times that people are relying on motivation rather than their habits and their discipline, not realizing that motivation is fleeting. It's here today and it's gone tomorrow. Whereas in reality, it is your habits that are going to lead you. It's the habits that you need to execute on a daily basis that help you get to the end of that journey and really get the results. But also, it's those habits that you can fall back on when life is tough, when you have high stress levels, when things aren't going your way, that you just say, listen, I may not feel like training today, but I'm someone that trains. So, if I train Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, those are my days to train. And if it's Tuesday and I don't feel like training, it doesn't matter. I'm going into the gym. And as long as I'm still healthy, it's not like I'm dealing with injuries. I don't have a family emergency going on. I'm still going to train because this is what I do. And that is what's going to allow you to stop talking yourself out of making, doing the things that are needed to make progress. And also, those are the times that when you show up, you show yourself that you're capable of more than you thought you were capable of, and you prove it to yourself. And that's the biggest component of making a physical transformation, because it also requires a mental transformation.
Dude, as always, this is a great episode. Where can everybody find you at?
Absolutely, my man. I appreciate that. So, guys, you can always find me first and foremost on Instagram, which is at Brandon _. For any coaching inquiries, consultations, any questions, please reach out to me on my email, which is bdcruzfitness@gmail.com. And then also, please, guys, don't forget to review the show, whether that be on Spotify or iTunes. Make sure to follow it first and foremost, so we know that you're a subscriber, but also to share the show. This is really how Jeff and I try to get on here on a weekly basis, come hell or high water. Believe me, there are times that we don't feel. So just like I was mentioning motivation, there are times that we don't feel like recording a podcast, or we have so many things going on in life, family stresses and family emergencies, and we make the time to be here to really provide value for you guys. So we would genuinely appreciate you guys sharing the show on your story, tagging us. Tell a friend, send it to them, and really be able to spread this no cost content, so that we can help to continue to bridge the gap between research and information and then practical application. So this is our daily or our weekly goal and vision, and we would love if you guys would help us to spread that. But Jeff, tell them where they can find you, my man.
Y'all can find me out there if you're interested in working with me in any capacity, or just chit-chatting with me about life. Y'all can find me on Instagram, Jeff Unbreakable Black, and YouTube, relentlessforever.com. Guys, as always, it's a pleasure. You have yourself a phenomenal week. Bye-bye.
Peace.